Hi, my name is Jonathan Reese, and the topic my group will be discussing today is the brain. The brain is a 3-pound organ that literally controls every function of the human body. It controls everything from you walking to passing the next bio exam. It's truly more complex than any supercomputer ever built today. The brain is constantly receiving signals and messages from the world we live in, and it receives these messages and signals through our senses: sight, smell, touch, taste, and hearing, often many at the same time. It assembles these messages in a way that we can understand, process, and store the information as memory. Intelligence, creativity, and emotion are just a few of the many things that the brain governs. In this video, we'll be covering different parts of the brain, such as the cerebellum, the cerebrum, and the brainstem. We will also be discussing the different hemispheres of the brain and how they function along with the lobes.
My name is Alba Lopez. During this presentation, I'm going to talk about the three main parts of the brain: the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the brainstem. The cerebrum is composed of the right and left hemispheres. As you can see, the cerebrum is the largest part of the brain, and this is why it performs many higher functions, such as interpreting touch, vision, and hearing, as well as speech, emotions, learning, and fine control of movement, such as writing or drawing. Under the cerebrum, it is located the cerebellum. The cerebellum coordinates muscle movements, maintain posture, and balance. Lastly, the brainstem. The brainstem connects the cerebrum with the cerebellum to the spinal cord. It performs many automatic functions such as breathing, rate heart, body temperature, wake and sleep cycles, digestion, sneezing, vomiting, and swallowing. These were the three main parts of the brain: the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the brainstem.
Hi, my name is Jorina Montemayor, and I'll be talking about the right brain, or the right hemisphere of the brain. So the right brain controls the left half of your body, and so if you were to have a stroke on your right brain, then it would paralyze, weaken, have movement problems with your left arm or left leg. And so also the right brain deals more with the expressive and creative tasks. So things like imagination, arts, music, rhythm, things like that, the right brain is responsible for. And the theory of being right brain means that you're more creative, you're more artsy, musically inclined, than more academic, which is what the left brain deals with. And so people with, that are right brain usually tend to like being shown how to do things rather than be told to do things, and also choose free response questions rather than multiple choice questions. And right brain people deal with careers that have arts or something with emotion or music. So things like interior and graphic design, being a manager, a counselor, or like a psychologist.
Hi, my name is Madison Royer and part of Group 40. I'm here to talk to you about the left hemisphere of the brain, or the left side of the brain. As Jorina previously mentioned, there is also the other hemisphere, the right hemisphere, which is dedicated to more creative thinking, while the left hemisphere has to do with things like scientific reasoning, your right hand control, number skills, analytical thought, logic, math, science, and then most importantly, language. So there's two separate areas where language becomes is controlled in the left side of the brain. So that's the Broca's area, which is in the left frontal lobe. If you were to damage this area, you might have difficulty moving your tongue or your facial muscles to produce these sounds of speech. So like if you were to do that, it's called Broca's aphasia, and it basically means you can't form letters or words, and you can't really write between the lines. The other area is called Wernicke's area. This is in the left temporal lobe. If you were to damage this area, one might speak in long sentences that have no meaning, and they are unaware of their mistakes. So language plays a very big part within this part of the brain.
Hello, my name is Felicia. Today I'm going to be talking about the different lobes of the brain. The frontal lobe is separated from the parietal lobe by a space called the central sulcus, and from the temporal lobe by the lateral sulcus. The frontal lobe is generally where higher executive functioning, including emotional regulation, planning, reasoning, and problem solving occur. This is why the frontal temporal dementia personality changes are often the first signs of this disease. The parietal lobe is behind the frontal lobe, separated by the central sulcus. Areas of the parietal lobe are responsible for integrating sensory information, including touch, temperature, pressure, and pain. Because of the process that occurs in the parietal lobe, we are able to, for example, discern from touching alone the two objects touching the skin at nearby points are distinct rather than one object. This process is called the two-point discrimination. Different areas of the body have more sensory receptors and so are more sensitive than others in discerning distinct points. There's also the temporal lobe, separated from the frontal lobe by the lateral fissure. The temporal lobe also contains regions dedicated to processing sensory information, particularly important for hearing, recognizing language, and forming memories. Auditory information. The temporal lobe contains a primary auditory cortex, which receives auditory information from the ears, and secondary areas that process the information so we understand what we're hearing. It's also in charge of visual processing. Certain areas in the temporal lobe make sense of complex visual information, including faces and scenes. And memory. The medial, closer to the middle of the brain, temporal lobe contains the hippocampus, a region of the brain important for memory, learning, and emotions. We also have the occipital lobe. The occipital lobe is the major visual processing center of the brain. The primary visual cortex, also known as V1, receives visual information from the eyes. This information is relayed to several secondary visual processing areas, which interrupts depth, distance, location, and the identity of seen objects.
To close, why we even picked this topic, why is it of interest? Well, when you think about the brain, it is one of the most complex organs of the human body, and it previously in our introduction, Jonathan said that it was it's more complex than a computer. So being able to identify and understand the functions and realize the effects of certain brain injuries, such as continual concussions of athletes. If you get 2+ concussions, you're at risk for brain damage, depending on exactly where the site of the injury is. And then controversial things going on with this topic, with just the human brain in general, is a big one is Alzheimer's disease. Recently, there have been millions of people diagnosed with Alzheimer's and dementia, and the growing increase, there's a growing increase in the amount of risk factors and people being diagnosed, and they started cutting that government funding. And so which is a huge issue because Alzheimer's and dementia, brain memory loss is the number of people diagnosed is supposed to rise exponentially within the next 20 years. I read that in a peer-reviewed journal that I'm using for my honors research thesis. And if we don't do anything about it, if we don't recognize and realize that this is an issue, then it can only get worse from here, causing healthcare costs to rise with the amount of people needing treatment and the amount of people going to doctors to get non-insured medical help. But that is our presentation of